if they aren't. She mentions Ofcom. As I said, I'm meeting with them later on. They have required from Royal Mail that improvement plan. We think that's long overdue, and one of the issues that I will be raising with Ofcom later on is progress with that improvement plan.
Well, I have a day for you, but I didn't get it.
Speaker, and I refer the House to my register of interest as a proud son of a local postie. We know this isn't the fault of the workers. We know that they are working day in, day out to get these letters out, but we know they are being told to prioritise parcels. I tried to go into my mail centre just before Christmas, as many do. Mr. Speaker, I know you do the same, but I was denied. An excuse was given and it's never been rearranged. Workers in there came to me and said they are trying to hide how bad it is in that mail centre from you as the local MP. So will the Minister outline to the House and to my constituents how we can turn this around? And I fundamentally disagree with the honourable member saying that this started with these new owners. This started from privatisation. End of. But how can we get this back on track? And can the government look at nationalising this service so our residents can get the letters that they desperately need for their appointments?
Well, Minister.
So I'm troubled to hear that he's not been allowed access to talk to his local sorting office. I think all of us have a staple in our diaries to go and visit the sorting office at Christmas or at other times of the year, and it's a really important part of the job as an MP. And I think he references something else, which is the anger that the posties themselves feel at this. This is not just a job for them. They feel that this is a service, and they, as much as anyone else, recognise that this is simply not good enough. On the issue of the prioritisation of parcels, Ofcom had examined this a few years ago and had found that there wasn't evidence of it as a policy centrally. But I've heard from so many members stories about the prioritisation of parcels, and so it's something I intend to raise with Ofcom later this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did meet the Minister some weeks ago, and I did suggest to him he might have to come back to the House if the Royal Mail had not improved their services. But can I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent question? Can I also thank you for granting the Westminster Hall debate next week on the 18th, tabled by another member? Mr. Speaker, you will know I raised this issue on the 13th of January as a point of order, and clearly the problem has got worse rather than better. I'd like to put on my record my thanks to all the posties. I think the whole House would like to thank all the work that they do in all of our constituencies. And this has had a huge social and economic impact on individuals throughout our constituencies. But what concerns me, to be fair, is the Minister has referred to can't intervene on a private company and is, of course, an independent regulator. So what can the Minister do? And if there's nothing he can do, perhaps he'll be coming back in a few weeks' time to repeat there's nothing he can do. But how does that help people that are waiting for medical results and other important information?
It's a very fair question. In terms of our action, as I mentioned, the Secretary of State brought together the ownership and the management to stress the need to get an agreement, to get the USO reforms and to get the service standards improved. These things are all connected. I myself have obviously stressed in no uncertain terms my own dissatisfaction with current levels of service. On NHS letters, myself and colleagues in the Department for Health are pressing to make sure that more NHS bodies take advantage of the barcode system to make sure that those letters are prioritised. So it is a private company, but we are exercising the pressure that we can to ensure that standards are improved.
Melanie Neal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My understanding is that letters must not be treated less favourably than parcels, but that absolutely is the case at the moment with internal Royal Mail targets, and that is the case at my Fotherby Street sorting office in Grimsby. The tracked at first policy is in place that means that parcels do take priority. Letters and non-tracked mail is then not prioritised. So first and second class cards, letters, etc. They are left sitting in frames for days and weeks. That builds up, as we've heard from other members today. There is also an issue about route revisions becoming issues for our posties, some of whom are regularly walking 30 to 40,000 steps a day. That is causing exhaustion, injury and illness. Now, my question is, it is not acceptable in any way for the government to say it cannot do anything. What is the government going to do to force Ofcom to take action that will really get things moving and change this policy that leaves people's letters sat in their frames for days?
Minister.
There's frustration that my honourable friend voices about the disconnect from what she's hearing from local sorting offices compared to what is stated as a company policy. I know is one that's shared across the House. As I say, on that issue of the prioritisation of parcels, it's something I'm going to raise with Ofcom later today. On those wider issues of working conditions for the posties, as I said, the Secretary of State had brought together the owners and the company to stress our view in terms of the importance of progressing those issues and getting to a situation where quality of service improves and where the workforce feel properly rewarded and respected.
Simon Hall.
Speaker, the postal delivery landscape is a fast-moving one, as the Minister will recognise, and I suppose as evidenced by the fact that in Denmark very recently they have ended entirely their postal service. Everybody now has to just use a private courier. What weight does he put on the words of Royal Mail, that they recognise the problems and are working hard? Does he take that in good faith? And a critique from Royal Mail, who clearly recognise that there are problems, is that sometimes the slow speed of response from Ofcom to suggestions from Royal Mail, which are disjointed from the fact that this is a very fast-moving landscape in a very competitive sphere. So when he meets Ofcom this afternoon, could he urge them to speedily respond to try to progress issues as they manifest themselves?
Minister.
I thank him for that helpful and practical suggestion. I'll certainly add it to the agenda of the meeting later on and report back to him on the outcomes of those discussions.
Ms. Twist.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend, the member for Blyth and Ashington, for raising this UQ because, as he will know, it's an experience that too many constituents are suffering from. Now, I started, when this first happened, corresponding with Royal Mail and asking why this was happening and got polite replies, but frankly, at this stage, Minister, fine words, butter no parsnips. We really need to see some action. So can I urge the Minister to push Ofcom to take action on this issue?
I thank my honourable friend for that, and as ever she's a doughty campaigner for everyone in the communities she represents. I will certainly be pressing Ofcom on these issues and will continue to press Royal Mail directly as well to stress that we want to see an improvement in standards and that current standards of delivery are simply not good enough.
Morgan.
Very much, Mr Speaker. In rural parts of the country like North Shropshire, where broadband, mobile signal and public transport is very poor, people are really dependent on their postal service. Where I live, people have contacted me to say that they have missed court documents, NHS letters, really important things for them to be able to get on with their lives. I visited the sorting office, as well as the prioritisation of parcels, which I've been told about by posties. The rounds are too long. The conditions that the postal workers work under are not good enough. And so there's a real recruitment and retention issue. What can Ofcom do to ensure that Royal Mail is putting the resources in place to make sure that letters can be delivered on time in rural places like North Shropshire?
Minister.
So, as I mentioned a moment ago, I think unfortunately the stories she tells are familiar to me because I've heard it from so many honourable members around this chamber. In terms of what can we do, as I say, we've been bringing together workforce and management to make sure that the talks on reforms to get the business into a sustainable footing and to ensure that quality of service improves. We've been bringing that together, and I will be raising those issues around the prioritisation of parcels with Ofcom later this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I refer the House to my register of interest? Can I also thank all postal workers in Stockport and across the UK? I think it's important to highlight that it was the coalition partners, Liberal Democrats and Conservatives, who privatised Royal Mail. Mr Speaker, I ran a survey online regarding services by Royal Mail in my constituency, and 89% of respondents said that they were unhappy, angry or disappointed by the service in Stockport. one of the examples was that mail wasn't delivered for almost 2 weeks, and then all of it was delivered on the same day, meaning that important appointments and information was missed. Can I please press the Minister, Mr. Speaker, in terms of what is he specifically going to do to improve services in Stockport and Greater Manchester, which is approximately 3 million people?
Minister.
Well, I join him in paying tribute to posties in Stockport and Greater Manchester. Like posties all across the country, they go the extra mile in incredibly difficult circumstances. As I mentioned earlier on, we are bringing together unions and management to make sure that we get to a resolution on those talks and progress the future of the business, and also pressing Ofcom in terms of the enforcement action they can take to progress the improvement plan which Royal Mail have committed to produce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just recently, Royal Mail in Tunbridge introduced a new working model which has been, quite frankly, an abject failure. I very much welcome the honourable member bringing this urgent question, because this is quite clearly not just a matter for one constituency or one community, but for the whole country. I'm very grateful that the Minister, who I know is assiduous in his role, will take this up. But will he particularly raise with the management that while we all recognise that this is not just about privatisation or ownership, it is about the change in the way people use the post and the way we use emails and so on, it does actually have a very real effect on people's lives, and particularly in communities like mine in Tunbridge. I'm not the only one who's missed appointments because the letter arrived weeks, even months after the appointment I was supposed to attend.
Minister.
Yep, so I know from my own discussion with officials on this that he's been in discussions with the particular issues in Tunbridge, and that Royal Mail are seized of those. He's absolutely right. I mean, members have raised hospital appointments and other things. I think it's also worth saying that the very important post that we as honourable members send to often very vulnerable constituents is also important, and it's a reminder of how this is such a central part of our national life and our economy, and we have to see it improve.
Natasha Iron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the member for securing this urgent question? In my constituency of Croydon East, we've had a massive uptick in complaints around letters being delivered late, but things like people paying for priority services and that not happening, but also constituents being advised to collect post from delivery offices without prior notification of an attempted delivery, so essentially becoming their own Royal Mail. Now, having met with workers locally over Christmas, I know that they are working incredibly hard to keep on top of this, and are just as frustrated as my residents. And when we raised, my biggest kind of concern is when we as members have raised this with Royal Mail, their response to us has been quite frankly rude and dismissive and a bit lacklustre. So can the Minister please outline what he will do to take action to ensure these postal services are protected in my community and for communities across this country?
Minister.
Thank you. Well, I'll thank the posties in Croydon for the efforts that they are making. They do an extraordinary job. I think she hits the nail on the head that we, sometimes might have lower standards for other delivery operators in the economy, but we expect a certain level of service from Royal Mail. And when people are paying more through stamps or they're paying for special delivery, they absolutely should expect to get what they are paying for. As I said, these are issues I'm raising directly with Royal Mail, that we're bringing together the workforce and the management, and I'm meeting Ofcom later on today.
Jess Brownfellow.
Speaker, the blame for failures doesn't lie with postal workers, as has been established well today, who are doing all they can to deliver a service, but it lies with the private company that is telling their staff to prioritise parcels and then pretending that that's not their policy. Constituents in my area of Chichester have received hospital appointments 4 days after the appointment was due to take place. One constituent in Selsey received their letter for a specialist appointment in London an hour before that appointment was due to take place. So what can the Minister do to put pressure on Royal Mail so that my constituents' health is not put at risk with their failures?
Minister.
Well, our constituents in Chichester deserve better, frankly, and that's why it's so important that we send a clear message as a government that we expect that improvement. It's why I'm having those conversations with Ofcom. It's also why, when the new ownership took over Royal Mail, we received that undertaking that they would not be able to take value out of the company until they improve, to try to ensure that there is an incentive for them to do better.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Communications Workers Union reporting chaos and demoralisation amongst its members as a result of the imposition and poorer paying conditions for posties and the company's decision to prioritise potential job cuts over service when it comes to USO reform. Can the Minister outline what the Government is doing to ensure the Royal Mail customers and workers are not made to pay the price of the mismanagement of our postal services, including utilising any powers allocated to the golden share?
Minister. Well, as I said a moment ago, when the new ownership took over, part of that deed of undertaking was that we would not allow them to remove value from the company until service improved. In terms of those negotiations and the impact on the workforce, obviously these are negotiations between the workforce and management, but I think the fact that the Secretary of State has been convening these meetings shows that we take this very seriously and it's a priority for our department.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like other honourable members, many of my constituents across Chester South and Eddisbury have been in touch about the poor levels of mail service. One constituent in Kelsall actually reached out to Royal Mail themselves after experiencing deliveries once per week at best, only to receive a reply from Royal Mail stating that service levels in our area are good. Yet that same constituent later received a hospital appointment letter after the hospital appointment itself, which is certainly not good. So does the Minister share my concern that Royal Mail appears to be dismissing legitimate complaints while failing to meet their universal service obligation, and what more can be done to hold Royal Mail to account?
Minister. Thank you. Well, she's previously pressed me on another aspect of postal services, the availability of post offices in her constituency, and she continues to campaign for her constituents. I can say I share the frustration in any situation as a Member of Parliament where you raise a concern and you're told everything is actually fine and not to worry about it. And it's precisely because I share that concern that I'm having that meeting with Ofcom later on today.
Mr. Speaker, well, the Royal Mail excuses are wearing very, very thin, aren't they? I have constituents who are going to the sorting offices and being presented with piles of letters, weeks' worth, and I have other constituents who, when their letters are being delivered, they're getting those same piles delivered in one go. So the Minister talked about Ofcom. I think he said he's meeting them today. Can I ask him then, does he think the regulator needs additional powers? Because it's very clear from his answers so far, and from the fact we're still here today, after months of this going on, that something isn't working. So can I encourage him to consider whether the regulator needs more and what he can do as a result of that?
Minister. I'll certainly talk to the regulator later today in those terms and ask that question. As I say, I think this is a business that's regulated through Ofcom, but where government has power, we are taking it. As I mentioned a moment ago, for example, within that deed of undertaking that the company have made, our insistence that they cannot strip money out of the company until service improves.
Brendan O'Hara. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whether it's the failure of Royal Mail to meet its USO or the skyrocketing price of heating oil, it seems that rural communities such as my Argyll, Bute and South Lochaber constituency are most impacted. We're all agreed that despite the often heroic efforts by the workforce, the service provided by Royal Mail management is totally unacceptable. The Minister knows we are 60 days from a Scottish parliamentary election in which 1 million people will vote by post. How confident is he that Royal Mail will be able to cope, and what measures is he putting in place to ensure that they do?
Well, Mr. Speaker, with relatives in the most remote parts of Scotland myself, I know that for the rest of us this might be an inconvenience. For rural customers in particular, it can be the stripping away of a lifeline. We have sought reassurances from Royal Mail that the current issues with service across the country will not impact on postal voting in the elections that are coming up. And I know that the Chief Executive of Royal Mail has a specific meeting in Scotland to discuss preparations in the days ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to put on record that despite testimony to the contrary. It is Darlington's postal workers who are in fact the best in the country, and they deliver their service to the best of their abilities. But they also provide a social service, reaching residents where they're often only the only visit that resident gets. I want to draw the Minister's attention to two cases that have been brought to me from constituents which have been quite shocking. One is, despite using the tracking system, application forms for a constituent to join the Royal Navy have gone awry, and that's obviously causing huge delays. And the second one is that one of my constituents successfully gained compensation from Royal Mail for a late delivery, but the cheque, which was sent in the post, bounced. So I'd like the Minister to allay some of the fears that we've got around the crucial public services and the communication via post going out from our departments and arm's length bodies. Thank you.
I think that's a very late delivery. Just to help everybody, I'm going to finish at 12:30, so let's help each other by being speedy. And the Minister's going to show me how he can reply quickly.
I am. She makes a really important point, although I noticed that everything seems to be the best in her constituency. It's not just missed post, it's missed opportunities like the one that she describes, and that's exactly why we're going to continue to pressurise directly and through the regulator to improve the service in areas like hers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Posters in my constituency have reported to me that one of the most serious problems is staff absence because they've been overworked and therefore they go off sick. And those deliveries do not take place. And the final straw for my constituents was when one of my constituents received a Christmas card on the 28th of February that had been franked before Christmas. So clearly there's a serious problem here, not just in rural areas, but in suburban areas as well. So could I ask the Minister, seek an urgent action plan on getting this right from Royal Mail, because otherwise we're going to be back here in another month's time with the same problem.
Minister.
He could be mistaken for being a CWU trade union official there. I'll get. You'll be across the floor. But I mean, he makes a really important and serious point, which is that those issues of staff conditions are directly related to the efforts around quality of service, which is exactly why the Secretary of State has been convening these meetings to progress those talks.
Helen Day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Dulwich and West Norwood have been suffering the consequences of Royal Mail's failings for years, particularly in the SE22 and SE24 postcode areas. Residents in SE24 recently had no mail for 4 weeks. A key problem in holding Royal Mail to account is that they are only required to report on their performance data on the first part of the postcode. This means that failures in individual delivery offices are disguised by sub-regional data. Will the Minister raise this issue with Ofcom and ask them to look again at the reporting requirements on Royal Mail so that they can be held properly to account?
Yep.
Minister.
As a former resident of SE23, I'll pay tribute to the posties in your part of the world, and I'll certainly add the suggestion she makes to the agenda of the meeting later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister recognise that meeting the universal service obligation is a challenge because of poor recruitment and retention, and that this is no surprise when Royal Mail offers new post men and women little more than minimum wage, and sites are really not fit for purpose?
So he raises a really important point that's core to the talks that are going on right now between unions and management. It's exactly why we're so keen to make sure that those are productive and come to a settlement that deals with the issues that he describes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his constructive engagement with me over the past few weeks around Royal Mail's poor services in my Bolton West constituency. I know he shares my utter frustration at the current service provision. I just want to flag with the Minister himself a letter I sent to a Horwich constituent on the 13th of February updating constituents about the progress I'd made with him on this matter. A constituent got in touch with me to say that letter itself was only received on the 25th of February, 12 days later, alongside missing correspondence from the DVLA, the NHS and the Department for Work and Pensions. And another constituent in Bolton received a Christmas card posted before the 14th of December that came through on the 7th of March. When will my constituents see an improvement in Royal Mail service?
Can we try and shorten them? Because some people's not going to get in, and that's what's really worrying me, because I know it matters to all of us, especially like myself, who's got the best post office and best post.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'll reassure his constituents that his efforts to transmit the dissatisfaction has been heard at the highest level. And if there was a prize for dark irony, I think he's probably just won it. It's because we want to see this improve as quickly as possible that we are taking the action that I've described, and it's why we'll continue to put pressure.
Bradley Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, I'll pay tribute to the posties across Bromsgrove, but not to the management of Royal Mail. What my constituents need to see is action, not more platitudes when Royal Mail respond to me saying they're very sorry that letters haven't been received. So can I implore on the Minister, please get together with the management of Royal Mail and Ofcom, deliver an action plan that's accountable to himself and us, via the Minister, to see an improved service for all of our constituents.
I'll reassure him that exactly the type of frustration that he's just described, which I've heard from so many honourable members, is what I've already communicated to Royal Mail, and I will do to Ofcom later as well.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I refer the House to my register of interest. Speaking with postal workers from across Alloa and Grangemouth, I know morale is rock bottom because years of savage cuts and restructuring that has negatively impacted their ability to do their job. Does the Government accept that the erosion of both the service and workforce morale is due to privatisation, and an essential public service like Royal Mail should be under public ownership for the public good? And if I may, Mr Speaker, when will the Government effectively hold bodies like Ofcom to account, because their inaction and impotence is costing our constituents dearly?
Well, he's absolutely right to point out that this is the result of very long-standing and structural issues within Royal Mail and postal services more generally. My focus later today with Ofcom is to ensure that they are pressed to deal with exactly the issues that my honourable friend describes.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I align myself with all of everybody's stories, but in one area of Sturminster Marshall, they received 2 deliveries across the whole of January, and then the Royal Mail tried to blame the flooding that happened at the beginning of February for why their letters weren't delivered. So I don't trust anything they're saying, but I'm concerned about my posties literally brought to tears on the doorstep, being told they can't have any overtime when they're advertising posts and they can't complete their rounds. They have explained to me that they are being expected to manage their decline. So what is the Minister doing to stand up for these frontline workers who are key to our communities?
Well, she's right to pay tribute to her local posties. It's because we recognise that connection between the sustainability of Royal Mail and the Postal Service and the conditions of workers and the importance of the talks that are going on that the Secretary of State has been convening the meetings he's convening and will continue to do so.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This situation is completely intolerable, as everybody's described. But will the Minister confirm that if the owners continue to fail to discharge their obligations as a matter of urgency, the option of taking Royal Mail back into public ownership will be fully considered because it's popular with the public?
Minister. Well, our focus at the moment is on ensuring that the talks that are underway are productive and end with measures that will get the delivery service improved and the business onto a sustainable footing. As I mentioned a moment ago, we do have that undertaking that the owners are not allowed to take value out of the company until those service standards improve.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My constituents who lodge a complaint with the local Royal Mail are receiving messages which says, "We're sorry to advise that deliveries in parts of the DN31 to 37 postcodes are being disrupted due to resourcing issues at Grimsby Delivery Office." Can the Minister give an assurance that, if he's not already done so, he is urged Royal Mail to deal with these staffing resources, because it's in the short term it's an acceptable reason, but not in the long term?
Yeah. Whenever honourable members raise local delivery issues with me, I do raise it through officials directly with Royal Mail. I'll certainly do so in his area because his constituents deserve a better service.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. People across Morecambe and Loonsdale are suffering from late Royal Mail deliveries, and in fact one constituent was told by a frustrated, overworked postie that second-class letters were being delivered once a week at most. So can I ask the Minister what steps he's taking to address this problem?
Minister.
Well, the service our constituents are getting clearly isn't good enough. We have met with Royal Mail to say that the situation is not good enough. We're bringing together workforce and management to progress the talks, which will enable us to improve those standards. And as I say, I'll be meeting Ofcom later on today to express her concerns.
Lock up.
Mr Speaker, my criticism is of Royal Mail senior leadership. It's certainly not of our local posties. In Upperban, they are indeed excellent. And also to my liaison officer in Royal Mail, who has gone above and beyond to get information flowing. Staff are at breaking point. Absences and gaps. We have 10 vacancies in Banbridge Depot. Letter delayed, you know the score. The big issue is hospital letters. Can you liaise with the Trust in Northern Ireland?
Minister. Yes, and I will raise the issues of Banbridge sorting office directly with Royal Mail. And in addition to the work I'm doing with the Department for Health, I'll make sure that we are having that conversation with health bodies in Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the government used the National Security and Investment Act to extract a golden share because it considered Royal Mail to be national critical infrastructure, I do find it slightly odd that we then, having recognised the importance, think there's nothing we could do. So would the Minister commit at least to consider taking powers that he might need to do direct intervention to make sure that our constituents, including mine in Stoke-on-Trent Central, get the letters on time when they want them?
Well, he's right to speak on behalf of his constituents and demand better service. In terms of what we can do, as I say, we are working through the regulator to make sure that services improve.